in Ukraine. The longer that war continues, the more dangerous it is for everybody. Jews, apparently, why we're putting that group in there. Because the thing is, the insulting, belittling language aside, you're right. There aren't enough trannies in Brooklyn or lesbians in San Francisco to fill the military. There also aren't enough, what's the word here, young, patriotic Christian men who remind us of John Wayne to fill the military either. We are a diverse nation. We need to be inclusive. And we need to not actively insult people who don't happen to fit our preconceived notion of what a member of the military should look like. So we're at a situation now where the military is denigrating Medgar Evers, who died standing up for the values that I think are central to our country. One of the things I love about the military is service above self. I mean, it is such an important message that everyone who serves us says that. No one I can think of personifies that more than Medgar Evers. Instead, we're going to go back to renaming the bases after the Confederates. Now, I know, apparently you spent a lot of time finding other names that applied to people who actually did serve this country honorably. But President Trump, just was it yesterday, 2 days ago now, down at Fort Bragg, when he blatantly politicized the United States military, sort of, as they like to say, said the quiet part out loud, that those bases are being renamed for the Confederates. So we honor white supremacist, slave-owning insurrectionists who lost, by the way, they're losers, instead of Medgar Evers. Can we please just stop and get back to the business of treating everybody equally and with respect? A fear of a left-wing cultural revolution is not solved by launching a right-wing cultural revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. And now I'd like to introduce our witnesses, all before us for the first time. General Kane, have you been before the committee before?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. First, we have the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. We have General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And accompanying our witnesses is Ms. Bryn McDonald, Acting DoD Comptroller, who is here to assist in answering our questions. Welcome. First, we'll start with you, Ms. Secretary. You're recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who's performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are very proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping America safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start today by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that improve the quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, we have directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in this budget to improve living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for military families, and improving the quality of the care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of our job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback we have received from the force. We will keep listening and keep looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion in total for national security, ends 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. Now, as is customary with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement this president's initiatives. In the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. In that 8% exercise, we found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department, which we reinvested. We killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. Working with the Department of Homeland Security, we have increased border security. We reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to achieve peace through strength, a lot of deferred maintenance to catch up on. To carry out the president's mission, we have set 3 priorities for the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we are restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that is exactly what we've done since day one. We are refocusing on what is truly important, which is warfighting and our warriors, sweeping away distractions and bureaucracy. We are setting standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. Our force is responding incredibly to these changes. Because of President Trump and his America First priorities, recruitment and retention under this administration are higher than they've been in decades. Historic numbers of young Americans are putting on the uniform and raising their right hand because they believe in the leadership they see. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. Second, we are rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged. Yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump, as he did in his first term, is correcting those mistakes. And we're doing this by, as was mentioned multiple times, reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process and working with Congress to do so, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons so our warfighters can meet the challenges of an evolving nature of warfare. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will also revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, bringing it to $47 billion in total we request for shipbuilding, after neglect from the previous administration. The budget also significantly increases funds to buy next-generation technologies that we need now and into the future: autonomous systems, long-range drones, long-range fires, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our military. These steps will help us remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world for generations to come. And third, we are reestablishing deterrence. When an opponent sees our well-equipped and tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test U.S. resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home. It starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of our southern border, and to that end, illegal crossings under the Trump administration have decreased 99.9%. The Indo-Pacific is our priority theater and China is our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled to the Indo-Pacific twice already to visit our forces and meet with allies and partners. As we shift our focus to the Indo-Pacific, President Trump looks to our allies and partners to be force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress on those fronts. We applaud allies who are stepping up, but others need to do more, and they need to do it quickly. And at the NATO Heads of State meeting later this month, we expect our NATO allies to commit to 5% of GDP on defense and defense-related investments, something that was almost inconceivable before President Trump led the charge in his first administration and continues in this one. As the President has rightly pointed out, it is only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. The Department of Defense is executing a common-sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious. Our investments to counter them must also be. That's what this budget does. It matches capabilities to threats. While we long for peace, we prepare for war, and we must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and that means acting fast as our opponents are. This committee is our critical partner in everything we do, and we appreciate your leadership and oversight. We look forward to accomplishing these goals, to achieving peace through strength, to supporting our warriors, to protecting our citizens and our taxpayers. Together with you, may God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary. General Kane, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Chair Rogers, thank you, sir. Ranking Member Smith, other members of the committee, I'm honored to join the Secretary here today and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you to testify on the President's FY26 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability, and lethality and survivability through the investments that you make in us. Ensuring every expenditure increases the survivability of the joint force and providing our warfighters the advanced capabilities, cutting-edge technologies required to dominate our adversaries at scale. I've got deep gratitude for everyone in this room and your commitment to helping us deliver the capability and capacity of our joint force and the 2.8 million service members, civilians, and their families to help us deliver the peace through strength that the Secretary talked about is very important, and I'm very thankful. It's my responsibility as chairman to understand the global situation, integrate the joint force to confront and manage risk worldwide, and ultimately advise our leaders. This demands a comprehensive understanding across every domain: land, sea, air, cyber, space, undersea, and all military services in every region of the globe, and frankly, all time horizons. It also requires making hard, informed decisions, which we advise on, in order to prioritize the finite taxpayer dollars that we have to ensure the greatest impact and capability for our joint warfighters across the globe. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation from adversaries seeking to do us harms. We are relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to deter and, if need be, win the wars of the future at every opportunity, while ensuring that we learn from the battlefields of the past and position ourselves for the battlefields of the future. This budget empowers the joint force to get after the Secretary's 3 pillars, as he just talked about: restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing our deterrence, and ensures our joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready while doing our #1 job of protecting our homeland. The President's budget invests in our warfighters. As I said, to win on the battlefields of the future, we've got to be properly armed with the right capabilities, lethal, modern, reliable, and survivable at scale. Victory requires people and platforms that overmatch the enemy, systems that work together in the harshest conditions, and technologies that give our warfighters an advantage at the tactical edge. The budget gives us necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible entrepreneurial talent, and we need every bit of it to support the increasing demands of the warfighters. This budget also helps the Joint Force become more globally integrated. I think of us as relationship entrepreneurs in the Joint Force, not only working together in the military, but working with our allies and partners, the interagency, industry, and of course Congress before crisis begins and before conflict comes upon us. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always be on the account, anticipating the next fight and getting out in front of it so that we're best prepared for our warfighters and their families. The most important component of our joint force is our people. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving the quality of life of our service members, medical care, and things important to them like the moving process. As I mentioned, our people are the most important part of this, and it's an honor every day for me to serve alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, and families our nation has ever known. I assure this committee that the force remains ready, capable to defend this nation, but we've got some work to do. With your continued support and prudent investment, we will maintain our competitive edge, strengthen our advantage, and ensure that our men and women in uniform are equipped with the right capability. I also remain thoughtful of those currently deployed right now and their families who stand the watch around the world, quietly serving to do our nation's work so that we can be here in this room right now. And I also hold a special remembrance for our fallen and their families who continue to show us every day what real courage and tenacity looks like. I thank the Congress and this committee for your support and collaboration in our shared commitment to deliver peace through strength. I look forward to your questions, and again, I'm honored to be here.
I thank the witnesses, and I now recognize myself for the first questions. Secretary Hegseth, you know, you've talked with me about this. We both know the President has a peace through strength agenda, and he's serious about it. And as I have talked to you about this, we are at the lowest level of defense spending as a nation in 80 years. And that has got to change. And I think that you and the President have sent a strong signal about wanting to get after that and change it with this year's proposed spending that includes the reconciliation package, which will put us over $1 trillion. It's a great first step. But as you and I both know, it's a 1 year. We're going to have to see continued funding, in my opinion, and growth in that top line in the out years. Do you share that opinion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the baseline of our planning process for FY26 was working with our partners in OSD and the COCOMs and elsewhere, identifying the threats that exist, the priorities of the administration, and what we need to spend to make sure we have those capabilities. And that was a reorientation from the previous approach of the previous administration. So that included exercises where we looked at reductions, where we could reinvest those into different priorities. So when you look at the two bills in one budget that add up to $961 billion and over $1 trillion, truly a historic investment, 13% increase, that was our statement to the President of what we think we need in order to spend and invest in ways that are postured for now and into the future. And what I would commit to you and to this committee is that in FY27 and 28 and 29, in this administration, we will perform the same exercise, knowing that threats, we believe that the policies of this administration will lead to peace and more opportunities. But as our adversaries continue to increase their capabilities and we learn about what's happening on the battlefield, that will lead to commensurate increases in ours. So we anticipate through that review that there probably will be increases, but I wouldn't put a number to it in the future.
Thank you. I just share the President's commitment that every NATO member nation should reach 5% of its GDP, and that includes us. And I think we can do it by the end of this president's term, and I'm determined to help him get there. Secretary Hegseth, at the president's direction, you're developing a plan on reforms of DoD acquisition. Just so happens we are too. You may have heard of the SPEED Act. It's a bipartisan, bicameral effort. As you develop your plan, what problems have you identified with acquisition reform that need attention?
Well, our new A&S, Undersecretary for A&S, was just confirmed. Mike Duffy, he's doing a fantastic job. He's diving right into this to include the SPEED Act, which we're reviewing in real time, that identifies a lot of the same problems we have. Streamlining processes, consolidating. We need competition and actual new entrants into acquisitions in a stale process. It's too bureaucratic. There are too many gatekeepers. Too many programs are gold-plated, which add to cost overruns, and they're late to need. So throughout the entire process, we've reached out to industry and to innovators and to outside-the-box thinkers and said, what would you do? How have you looked at this problem? To include this committee, how would you attack this so that we can get what we need in the hands of warfighters faster? It's unacceptable in this real-time world we live in, where you've got off-the-shelf and off-the-shelf capabilities and open architecture opportunities, and you can do virtual design of products that you don't have to build a hard copy, that we're not doing it faster. So everything necessary we want, and we're going as fast as we can.
Great, thank you. General Kane, as you know, there's been a lot of dialogue around here about selling off some of our spectrum. Can you talk to us about the importance of preserving the spectrum around the lines that the DoD uses?
You bet, sir. Spectrum is a critical part of our warfighting enablers, and as the administration and the Congress carefully consider the slices that we must preserve, there are certain areas within that my military advice to the Secretary and others is to hang on to that. I'm grateful that the Deputy has been really leading this effort with the Congress and to sort of measure risk. I understand that economic security is also national security, so the truth is always somewhere in the middle, but there are some segments in the lower end that frankly, I would strongly recommend we preserve and protect for defense matters.
I raise that because I want you to know we're going to be taking our cues from you, and if you're against it, I'm going to be against it. With that, I'll yield my time, or yield back and recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the budget point, I made this point before the committee before. The House just passed a budget that adds nearly $3 trillion to an already out-of-control debt. So if we do really want to spend money on defense or anywhere else, we ought to be willing to pay for it. And I certainly go back through generations of, bipartisan problems with this. You can't have a debt that size and keep coming back talking about how much money you're going to spend, whether it's defense or whatever your priorities are. And Mr. Secretary, you said the 99% down on border crossings and the border is secure. At the same time, we're going to take $1 billion out of the MILCON budget, out of building barracks, to send it for the border. And there's another 4,000 troops that we're planning on sending down to the border. Given that the border is secure, might you rethink that spending?
Well, sir, we are securing it. It is secure, but it's a manpower-intensive effort at the beginning.
Two different words there. It's either secure or secure. And it sounded to me like you said it was secure.
It is secure.
Okay.
What we're continuing to do is expand that and fortify it through infrastructure, which is a big part of the budget on the Department of Homeland Security side as well. So that $1 billion you're talking about was from the CR in FY25. We fully fund that back and more in FY26 with a recognition that we were dealing with the world as it existed when we came in. And the previous administration said they needed new legislation to secure the border. It turns out you just needed a new president.
I would point out
president with the Defense Department and DHS that was willing to go to the border and actually secure it, which is what we
not submitted a budget yet. So whether or not you're putting that money back in remains to be seen. You have definitely taken it out. And I think the obsession there, and I don't disagree, the border needed to be secure. But from a pure budget standpoint, let's just not keep the political focus on that. Let's make sure that we're funding some of the other priorities that we have. So when it comes back to acquisition reform and the chairman's point, it's our committee, certainly Congress is part of the problem. We set up a lot of requirements. Defense contractors are part of the problem. I'm curious, how would you get after reforming the culture at the Pentagon so that you can move faster, number one, and number two, how would you get after the defense contractors that push the requirements process? And specifically, what would you do about the requirements process to try to speed things up?
Well, first of all, I think gold plating is a real problem, sir. I mean, across the department.
Interesting to use the word gold in this particular context, but yes, I agree with you, actually.
We maybe could use a little bit more silver plating on occasion. A recognition that the 99% solution is oftentimes the enemy of the 85% solution that delivers 2 years sooner. And that's contractors and other companies wanting to do right, but trying to do too much and overpromise, and then they're under-delivering, and the warfighter
not always wanting to do right. In some cases, just
not
wanting,
always,
just
not
wanting
always.
to make money,
So,
but yes.
The change is also in acquisitions about people. You need reformers in these positions. I'm here to be a disruptor of those processes. Our deputy secretary has extensive business experience. The types of people we're bringing in as undersecretaries have been disruptors and innovators in the private sector who recognize that bureaucracy can be dysfunctional and needs to be disrupted. So it's taking outside-the-box unique approaches. I mean, virtual design is a big example. How many times are we going to build something physically that takes a year to build when you could use AI and computing power, design it virtually, identify the flaws, and move more quickly, or create open architecture so you can move.
Our committee stands ready to work with you.
I mean, there's 500 different things we can do, and we're doing them.
Yeah, and I'm sincerely concerned about this. Is it the policy of the Department of Defense that we need to be prepared to take Greenland and Panama by force if necessary? Is this a policy that you have within the Department of Defense in accordance with the President's wishes?
I heard what you said about those two countries and saying we need to worry about China. Well, we are worried about China.
That wasn't my concern.
China's malign influence in Panama.
I was concerned with us
China has
saying
control
that
of
using
ports
military
or malign
force to take
influence
another
over
sovereign
Panama,
country's territory.
we should pay attention to that.
Right.
So Panama is very key terrain that we've focused on, and we've been willing to focus
So we
on,
should
as
take it,
is Greenland
we should
key
take
terrain.
it by military force. They're important. I'm not going to argue with that.
The Arctic is
I'm
incredibly
arguing with
important,
the
and
using
adversaries are
our
trying to
military
gain-
to take it by force.
Our job at the DoD is to have plans. And
Do you have a plan for that?
Our job at the Defense Department is to have plans for any particular contingency.
Including the contingency of basically invading
Any
Denmark.
contingency you need, we've got it. We've got a building full of planners, and we're prepared to give recommendations whenever needed.
So just be clear, you have plans to take Panama and Greenland by force if necessary.
I think the American people would want the Pentagon to have plans for any particular contingency.
Not
and
for that
thankfully,
one,
we
in
are
my
in the
opinion.
planning business.
Speaking on behalf of the American people, I don't think the American people voted for President Trump because they were hoping we would invade Greenland. I'm going to go out on a limb on that one. I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your visionary leadership. And indeed, each witness, thank you for your service to America. And in particular, Mr. Secretary, your service is so appreciated, and I'm especially grateful as the son of a flying tiger who helped liberate China, as the father of 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, Italy, and Afghanistan, and as a 31-year Army veteran myself. Your leadership for peace through strength is crucial, and I believe we're in a Cold War we did not choose of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. It began with war criminal Putin invading Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and then Iranian puppets invading Israel on October 7, 2023, with the Chinese Communist Party threatening Taiwan. President Trump tried to deter war criminal Putin in his first term with Javelin missiles to Ukraine, American troops in Poland, and stopping Nord Stream 2. But Putin ignored Trump, and defying Biden has continued his efforts. Upon election of Trump, there were hopes for peace, but Putin insulted Trump with the murderous attacks at Christmas and New Year's. Every time President Trump tries to reduce the conflict, war criminal Putin increases mass murder of drones and missile attacks on the people and civilians of Ukraine, including hospitals this week. War criminal Putin is clearly fixated to resurrect the failed Soviet Union, with troops still in Transnistria of Moldova, rigging elections in Belarus, invading the Republic of Georgia, and rigging elections against the legitimate President Salome Zurishvili of Georgia. Additionally, there have been new threats this week against the Baltic republics, our NATO allies. Every outreach by Trump has been mocked by Putin. With that in mind, an incredible achievement of President Trump is to awaken our NATO allies, now including Sweden and Finland, that with Germany pledging now 5% remarkably, and 17 of our allies now provide a larger GDP support for the people of Ukraine than the United States because of President Trump's encouragement. What is the latest status on encouraging our NATO allies of providing for peace through strength?
Thank you for the question, sir. The one thing I would take issue with is the characterization that Vladimir Putin ignored President Trump. I think Vladimir Putin paid a lot of attention to President Trump in his first term, and that's why the invasion did not happen under President Trump's watch. Instead, under the weakness and perceived weakness of Joe Biden.
Ignored and proceeded to
He paid attention under President Trump, and then when Joe Biden was in the office.
It really set the stage, sadly, that if he had really appreciated what President Trump was trying to do, he wouldn't have invaded again, but whether Biden's president or not.
But to your question about Europe,
yes,
President Trump has invigorated a truly historic investment amongst NATO allies to shoulder the burden of the defense of the continent of Europe. Vladimir Putin saw what he believed to be weakness, and I believe President Trump has stood up to that by reminding our allies that they need to spend on their own defense and ensure that they're able to shoulder the burden to defend the continent. That's been a good development.
And indeed, I was grateful last February coming back from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe and meeting with the president, and I told him how exciting it was to see our allies understand that indeed he supports Ukraine, he supports NATO and peace through strength. And General Kane, I particularly appreciate your VMI credentials of professionalism, and with that in mind, we understand that even today, the International Atomic Energy Agency has declared Iran in breach of non-proliferation agreements, and what are we doing to deter the aggression coming from Iran?
Well, sir, first I noticed in your bio that you went to that other school in Lexington, which was always hard for me to get my head around, sir.
Hey, I grew up in the holy city of Charleston. When I saw Vimis, I thought they were Citadel cadets.
Yes, sir. I'm now a joint guy, so I'll keep all those comments to myself, sir.
You're here.
You know, sir, throughout the IAEA report is certainly troubling. The international community seems to be thinking about what they're going to do about it, and as are we watching the situation develop and carefully monitoring the report.
Gentleman's time's expired.
America's in good hands with your
Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, this morning, the eyes of our closest allies, UK and Australia, are on your department as a result of Undersecretary of Policy Eldridge Colby's announcement last night that he's launching a 30-day review of the trilateral AUKUS mission. I would just note that it's not just their eyes, it's our eyes in this committee. In 2023, by a vote of 310 to a small minority, we passed the AUKUS authorities and followed up on that in terms of AUKUS investments in the billions of dollars into our submarine industrial base. Australia has reciprocated, as you know, with its own investments in our submarine industrial base. And since then, since 2023, what we've seen that the three countries working together, that we now have well over 100 Australian sailors and naval officers that have gone through joint training. I've seen them in my district at graduation ceremonies. They're joint crewing Virginia-class submarines. We also have joint U.S.-Australian submarine repair work that's happening in Guam and Hawaii. And our submarine industrial base last year delivered 2 Virginia-class attack submarines. They're the New Jersey and Iowa. This year it'll be Massachusetts and Idaho. And the year following, it's going to be Arkansas and the Utah are going to be delivered during that 3-year period. General Kane, how many nuclear-powered attack submarines is in the Chinese Navy? Do you know that answer?
It's nuclear-powered attack boats. I
Yes.
mean, it's
How many attack
yes, sir.
nuclear powered?
Many. I'll get you
No,
the
well, the
number.
answer is 6.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we've seen in the industrial base is that last year, this year, and next year, we're going to be delivering that identical number. They're building a 7th. You can check the Wall Street Journal, and you can see where that boat ended up at the bottom of the Yangtze River because of their inability to actually do the hard work of building nuclear-powered submarines, which is probably one of the most complex undertakings in really industry of any sort. Again, the Australians are investing in Perth, and so that we are going to have rotations of Virginia-class submarines that are already started to happen. Admiral Paparo testified in vocal support of AUKUS when he came before this committee just a few weeks ago. And again, I would just say, you know, there is nothing wrong with reviewing any program. We're all accountable. Anything of this magnitude certainly deserves review. But a 30-day review on a project that really took years to develop, in which this committee was instrumental in terms of in enabling. And in my opinion, China's reaction to AUKUS is the ultimate sort of endorsement of AUKUS because they hate it. And the one commitment I would ask, Mr. Secretary, is just your commitment that this committee in Congress is going to be integrally involved in whatever the review process is, because we have skin in the game, we have history, and we have allies who really are, again, issuing statements this morning. The Prime Minister of England, the Stephen Lovegrove, the special representatives for AUKUS, Richard Marles, putting out statements trying to reassure their countries that the U.S. is still going to follow through on this commitment. And we want that reassurance as well from you. Can you, again, give us that commitment that Congress will be involved in this review process? And I have one more follow-up question.
As it has been, Congress will be involved, but I've had an ongoing review myself. I've spent a great deal of time with Marles and Healy at the Australia and UK.
And I've been following your work
reviewing it myself.
Yes.
Secretary Colby's reviewing it.
Okay.
We know that. It's all important to make sure it fits our
Right.
needs.
State
also.
Department, by the way, has skin in the game too, and they should be involved in it as well. I just want to reiterate Mr. Rogers' point and Mr. Smith's point. If we really care about strengthening the industrial base, we need to have procurement stability, which means we need to have a budget, a real budget, not a $20 billion shipbuilding budget, which Senator Wicker just eviscerated a couple of days ago. That's $17 billion less than the last Biden shipbuilding budget. That's what got sent over to us. And again, that's the way, and I represent a district that is the general contractor for both programs. You want to strengthen hiring, supply chain, and facility growth. You need to have procurement stability. That's not what we're seeing from the Office of Management and Budget. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your written statement, and also thank you for your recognition of the importance of our nuclear deterrent, and specifically our investment in our modernization of our nuclear deterrent. We are behind, as you know, in the modernization of our nuclear stockpile. Your recognition of our investment in our triad and our command and control is incredibly important. Thank you also for your recognition of the importance of our future investment in missile defense and the importance that the Golden Dome will play. The Secretary General of NATO has recently made statements of his concern of Russia's future attempt to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space. Specifically, he has said, "We are aware of reports that Russia is examining the possibility of placing nuclear weapons in space. This is very worrying. Space is also very important for our deterrence and defense, just as important as land, sea, air, and cyberspace. In recent years, space has become increasingly clouded, dangerous, and unpredictable. We know that competition in space is fierce. I recently had the opportunity to speak to him. He was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in my community as we were commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Peace Accords. His concern was that this is not getting worldwide enough of attention. We had General Saltzman recently in front of the committee. He has characterized that if Russia were to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space, that would be day zero, that if that was put in space, that next day, that it would be irresponsible for us to count on space, that we would have to spend trillions of dollars and seek technology that we don't have to find solutions as an alternative to space, both commercially, for military, in really to redo what is really society today. As you know, it would affect both our nuclear deterrence, our efforts for missile defense, even our investments in Golden Dome. In this venue, obviously, we can't discuss all of the details of what we're doing, but I would ask if you would please confirm that this is a threat that is a priority to the Department of Defense, as it has been characterized by the Secretary General of NATO, and acknowledge that as it is a priority for us to prevent the deployment of nuclear weapons in space, and that it is a priority for us to work with our allies to uphold our commitment to the Outer Space Nuclear Treaty that prohibits the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. Sir.
Well, thank you for the question, sir. As you alluded to, there are a number of aspects to this question or answer that can't be discussed here, but I would underline our complete commitment to the space domain, to the hardening of the space domain, to prevention of escalations in the space domain, but most importantly, to the dominance of the space domain. I mean, that is, it is the future of how we see, it's the future of how we sense, it could be the future of how our adversaries fight and how we deal with that. So I think President Trump, yet again, was ahead of the curve when he created the Space Force in his first administration. People said we didn't need it. We are relying on it every single day now to ensure, alongside the Space Force and private enterprise, that we're delivering the capabilities we need that are resilient, that are redundant, that are capable of all aspects of all domain warfare, if necessary. And preventing adversaries from gaining an advantage is a huge part of how we look at space.
This threat is not classified. Russia's threat of deploying an anti-space, an anti-satellite nuclear weapon in space is not classified. Obviously, this is a priority of the Department of Defense, and I just want your confirmation that this is a priority that you're tracking, and you too see that as a threat to the United States, and certainly to the United States and our space infrastructure, and certainly, our whole national security infrastructure.
We track all potential escalations. Yes, sir.
Okay. And lawyer here, I just want to help you out because people try to twist your words. You are not confirming in your testimony today that at the Pentagon there are plans for invading or taking by force Greenland, correct? That is not your testimony today.
All my testimony is that the Pentagon has plans for any number of contingencies.
It is not your testimony today that there are plans at the Pentagon for taking by force or invading Greenland, correct? Because I'm sure as hell hope that it is not your testimony.
We look forward to working with Greenland to ensure that it is secured from any potential threats.
Excellent. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your opening statement, your concerns about Ukraine and the budget issues. Mr. Secretary, in your opening statement, you spoke to the issue of cutting waste and abuse at the Pentagon. I assume you intend to do that. Is that correct? Yes? No?
No, we have done that, sir.
All right. And therefore, it must be your responsibility. I want to bring to your attention a statement that the President made in early February. He said there is no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. You could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons. And they're building new nuclear weapons. We're all spending a lot of money that we could spend on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. So I'd like to focus for a few moments on one of the most expensive programs at the Department of Defense, the Sentinel ICBM, which is to replace the Minuteman III. The cost of this program has exploded from $78 billion to over $141 billion, not including a new nuclear bomb for the Sentinel and the command and control systems, which would add somewhere $20 to $40 billion. All the while, we have a Minuteman III that can continue to provide the ground leg of the triad for at least 10 to 15 more years. Should we cut the Sentinel program?
Well, President Trump is correct to point out that proliferation is very dangerous, but he has also in his budget ensured we fully fund the nuclear triad, every aspect of it in a historic way. The Sentinel as one leg of it, and that modernization is critically important. As you know, it faces a Nunn-McCurdy breach for being behind, and as a result, it has to be reviewed, but it's incredibly important. And so our budget does look at ensuring to...
Excuse me, sir. So you have made a decision to continue even though the review is incomplete?
The review is ongoing. The investments we've made allow us to continue should the review come out
The
the way we
answer
hope
is
it does.
you continue the Sentinel program even though the Nunn-McCurdy review is incomplete. I'd like now to move over to Ukraine. The chairman of this committee spoke very strongly about the Ukraine situation. And the necessity of the United States being strong in support of Ukraine. It's very, very clear that a review of what Mr. Putin has said over the last 2 decades, that he is determined to reestablish the Soviet empire, and Ukraine is the current step to achieve that. Ukraine's security is our security, my view, and what is dangerous for Ukraine will be dangerous for NATO and therefore dangerous to the United States. Yesterday, 2 days ago, in response to Senator McConnell, who asked, which side of the Ukraine conflict do you want to win? And you said, the president is committed to peace in that conflict. Ultimately, peace serves our national interest, and we think it serves the interest of both parties, even though that outcome will not be preferable to many in this room, at that time the Senate, and I would also say this room too, preferable to many in this room and many in our countries. Mr. Secretary, when you said that peace serves our national interest, does that peace come from a complete surrender of Ukraine and total victory for Russia?
That's never been a characterization of my statement, sir. We think peace is in the best interest, but I would point out, Ukraine is not the U.S. and Ukraine is not in NATO, and to draw that comparison is to draw one that is not correct. But we hope for peace. We believe peace is in the best interest of the United States of America, and our policies are pointing toward that.
Well, let me go back to what I asked you. Is that peace, could the achievement of that peace through the complete surrender of Ukraine and the withdrawal of U.S. support for Ukraine, is that a worthy peace, and is that peace in the long-term and actually the short-term interest of the United States?
If you look at the billions of dollars that have been invested in Ukraine, you could hardly characterize that as a surrender from the United States. So the existing military front line of troops is as difficult as it is, moving slowly. Where peace ends at the end of that, nobody really knows. But the president has worked harder than anybody else to try to get a peaceful outcome.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kane, Mrs. McDonald, thank you. Thank you for the incredible job that you all are doing. Secretary Hegseth, I want to begin with you and talk about all the efforts that went into the defense portion of the One Big Beautiful Bill and making sure that we're getting all the pieces of this correct. Lots of back and forth, and we know that there's a long-term need to make sure that we get this right. And we want to make sure, too, as we look at priorities from all the different bodies, that we are assuring that those are continued on as the process takes place. We know there's going to be additional investments in things like shipbuilding and ground vehicles. And we've also made substantial investments in modernization, including things like Golden Dome, things that are critical to this nation's future. I just wanted to get from you, can you assure the committee that of the $150 billion that's here, that it is going to be laid out and spent in exact alignment with what the committee has laid out, really on a line-by-line basis?
Well, sir, you will have, and I can refer to Bryn on that for the details, but you will have a complete reckoning, and many of it the committee already does have, of what we intend to spend and where. But from our viewpoint, it's 2 bills, 1 budget.
Right.
And ultimately, we've worked with the committee and will continue to ensure that every priority is funded either through the base bill or through reconciliation. But I defer to Bryn.
Yeah, no, just concur with the Secretary. We've worked very well with Chairman Rogers' staff and with Senator Wicker's staff on it as well, and we'll continue to do so now that the data of the budget is rreleased.
That's great. Listen, I think it's key, especially since there are a lot of different moving parts here, to make sure that we're all in alignment with that. Yesterday, Admiral Kilby confirmed that the U.S. Navy still needs a sixth-generation fighter, that FAXX is still critically important. And earlier this year in our Tactical Air and Land Subcommittee, we received a lot of testimony about the continued requirement need for FAXX, the Navy's unique need to have that fighter that is able to function in a highly contested environment, having the ability to deal with even more ability for our adversaries to sense that aircraft. We know that in the FY25 CR, there was $453.8 billion, put $1 million put towards that. I'll get the number right. And in reconciliation, $500 million. So you can see Congress is consistently pushing ahead and saying this is where we need to go. And we'd be a little surprised if the support for this fell off, especially since we're looking at the requirements and not seeing any change there. So, General Kane, I wanted to get from you, do you still see the requirements for FAXX being the same today as it's been developed through the recent months by the Navy to project and say this is what the Navy needs in order to have that ability to provide a tactical air presence in places like the South China Sea and elsewhere where that environment is going to be highly contested?
Congressman, thanks for the question. And, you know, as we look at the threat picture out in the Pacific, the requirements themselves, I think, are still valid. I think it comes down to a question that many of the folks on the committee have talked about, and that's the ability to produce at a particular time. And I'll defer to my civilian leaders on the timing and synchronization of that program. But we do need, you know, capability that is mobile, whether it's FAXX or others that enable us to win on the battlefields of the future. I'll defer to the Secretary and Bryn for policy-related stuff on the synchronization.
Well, Secretary, I'll ask in addition to that, I think to build on Chairman Kane's comments, has the Pentagon's plans changed? Because, you know, since April, and especially in our subcommittee, you know, we've looked very, very specifically about this need, looking at NGAD, which the President's made a decision on, but then looking at the Navy's need. Can you tell us, are things continued on track for FAXX? Are there any changes there?
Well, sir, as you know, certainly we have adjusted the way we see the world from the Biden administration through interim national defense strategy and planning guidance.
Sure.
That's what went into the decision that we made on F-47 or NGAD, and this budget has a significant investment in that. FY26 funds the complete design of FAXX. We're certainly reviewing it, working with the Joint Staff, working with the COCOMs at its application in around the globe. So it's in the mix. But we recognize we also need a capability as quickly as possible for the threats that we face.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple
targets
question.
or
Did it come from?
locations
It's a
or-
very simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah. What was What was the classification marking? Because
Again,
DoD
classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum. You know that.
you can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say
that's what
anything.
I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time,
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr.
as
Secretary, does
of Defense
accountability apply to you or not?
is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm
ships
just asking if it applies
very
to you.
successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
I'm just asking about
we
I reclaim my
put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No, I didn't ask about military vessels. I
which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
how many commercial vessels?
Transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have transited
Well,
the Red
would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships?
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
for
me,
military
Mr. Secretary.
ships?
They're to you.
We have responsibly put military.
The answer is zero.
First.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was.
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why.
That we
And
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we
Why
want better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am and Mr. Secretary, most of my questions are going to be for General Kane. I will tell you, Mr. Secretary, I would appreciate it. The opportunity to speak with you offline about a couple of things. I'm from Georgia. Spoke with you briefly. I supported Hal and Julia Moore's name remaining on the base, as you know. I support Eisenhower's name remaining on the base. I don't want to go too far into that. I don't want any questions. But I will tell you this, the selection of Gary Gordon, one of the most valorous, heroic acts of any American soldier, certainly in modern times. He was one of the 2 soldiers that went in with Black Hawk Down, Delta snipers, that both died there together. I do have a suggestion on that. When the Army has named anything after Gary Gordon, Randall Schugart's name has been tied to the name. The Army has historically named things Shugart Gordon because those 2 guys went in together, they fought together, they literally died together, and the historical accounts cannot figure out which one actually died first. And so if the name in Augusta is going to change back to Gordon, I just respectfully suggest that you consider Schuchart Gordon is the Army who has historically named other things. You can't tell Gordon's story without Schuchart's story. I say it respectfully. General Kane, the Communist Chinese Party assesses U.S. strength, that our strength lies in our alliances and partnerships. If they believe those ties are fraying, how can we use the Ukraine war to demonstrate U.S. strength, capability, and resolve to regain leverage over the Chinese and their assessments of the United States?
Well, sir, thanks. Thanks for the question, and first, thanks for recognizing two great warriors who showed us what courage and tenacity look like when you infill into the place that they did on those two MH-60s, knowing full well what they were going to face on that objective, and then making the full commitment to give their lives on behalf of an injured teammate. That's what America looks like. So thank you for highlighting that, sir. Bless you, Congressman, by the way.
He's a SEAL.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know a lot of SEALs. Sir, I think, mill to mill, military to military, our relationships with allies and partners around the world remain incredibly important. I'm grateful to serve alongside so many great, not just joint force partners, but international partners as well. And I think that the courage and tenacity that our forces out in EUCOM have shown through this journey, and the teammates that they've built on both sides of those borders is an example of what we should be doing.
If I can follow up with that, the assessments, Ukraine would survive 9 days, 10 days, some 15 days at the outside. But the rapid innovation cycle that they have candidly taught us, in some cases, how do we implement that into the U.S. defense industrial base and get our weapons developed as fast and candidly at the cost, because we cannot afford to pay what we're paying per weapon for what we're going to have to do. And at the same time, how do we develop the defense systems against drones so that we don't lose multi-million-dollar tanks to $5,000 drones?
Yes, sir. Thanks for highlighting the innovative, entrepreneurial, and diabolical spirit of attack that exists out in that part of the world. And, I've been out there and seen what they're doing in terms of drone manufacturing, iterating on the line, linking up with partners, taking the fight to the enemy out there. It's impressive. And we've learned from those examples. That same spirit of innovation has come back to the United States. And when I think about rebooting our defense industrial base and our national industrial base, I think of it through 4 C's, and it starts with that culture that you're alluding to about innovation and entrepreneurialism inside combat. The second part is creating some competition, and I think that's a key part as you help us do that here in the Congress. Third thing is we gotta write better contracts on our side.
100%.
And we have to be better buyers and share the risk, as I've talked about with the chairman before. And
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It shouldn't come as no surprise that I have serious concerns with both the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines to Los Angeles. I served in the Marine Corps. We are trained to be war fighters, not for crowd control. Everyone here should be alarmed that the President has sent armed forces into a city against the wishes of a governor and mayor. I am concerned this administration is purposely escalating the situation with this step and politicizing our armed forces in the process. Let's call it for what it is. It's political theater. Hegseth, are the Marines in Los Angeles ordered to protect property by any means necessary?
Sir, I would say the ICE officers and police officers being attacked is not political theater. The National Guard and Marines.
Just yes or no. Just yes or no.
the National Guard and Marines have the full authority to protect federal ICE agents.
Yes or
federal
no?
agents, and
Just
federal buildings.
can you just say yes or no? This isn't Fox anymore. Just yes or no.
They're there to protect federal agents and federal.
Another BS answer. Under the SRUF, the use of force, are Marines allowed to fire warning shots?
No.
Now that's more like it. Isn't that easy? Well, you know, I'm going to beat this drum because you refuse to take responsibility. Will you take responsibility for having made a mistake? Not to mention, many people would say break the law in participating in the Signal group chat that included a journalist, your wife, your brother, where classified information was shared.
Sir, every way I communicate is authorized. Every way I communicate.
Okay, if you want to say that. I have called for your resignation. I didn't think you were qualified before your confirmation, and you have done nothing to inspire confidence in your ability to lead competently. You broke the law in sharing classified information, and in doing so, endangered the lives of our service members that you are responsible for. Your inability to hold yourself accountable makes you incapable to lead. This alone makes you unfit to be the Secretary of Defense. Secretary, do you think the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, a nation that is hostile towards the United States?
Well, as you know, sir, President Trump is committed to peace.
No, I just want yes or no answers.
Today, the United States has spent billions of dollars.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Over years.
Just yes or no. Can I get a yes or no out of you?
We continue to send.
Come on.
Presidential drawdown.
It's that easy. Kindergartners could give me a yes or no. Yes or no.
Yes, we support peace in Ukraine.
Come on. Is this really leadership? You're an embarrassment to the United States. If Russia invades NATO allies, are you going to recommend to the president that we fulfill our Article 5 obligations?
Well, Russia has not invaded NATO allies.
No.
President Trump has invigorated the NATO
No.
alliance.
I reclaim my time. Yes or no? It's that simple.
There's Article 5 in NATO, which we recognize.
So is the answer yes or no?
Further Russian aggression and another devastating war in Europe. Our forces in South Korea protect our ally, but also serve as a critical strike force if North Korea attempts a launch on our homeland. U.S. service members in CENTCOM and AFRICOM are fighting daily to defeat the terrorist threat against America and Israel while maintaining maximum pressure on Iran. And our forces in Japan, the Philippines, and throughout the Pacific are keeping China's hegemonic desires in check and preserving trade routes critical to our economy. Together, this collaborative posture forms the backbone of American deterrence. Secretary Hegseth is right when he says America first does not mean America alone. I appreciate the time you recently spent in the Pacific and Europe reinforcing our alliances and partnerships, but also pressing our allies to increase their defense spending. It is long past due for our NATO allies and those around the globe to shoulder a greater share of the collective defense. But we must understand it will take some time for them to grow their capacity. In the interim, we should not make large-scale posture changes that undermine our deterrence. I look forward to working with the administration on building the ready, capable, and lethal fighting force we need to deter our adversaries. And with that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I'll start with three substantial notes of agreement. One, we do face an incredibly complex threat environment. We face Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, various other terrorist organizations working together against American interests in a way we have never seen before, and with an economy like China's that we've never seen before. It's going to be very difficult to meet those challenges. Second, innovation is incredibly important and crucial to that. The changes in warfare are happening at a more rapid pace than I think we've ever seen before. We have to innovate more quickly, and I appreciate your leadership on getting after acquisition reform, because what's absolutely true is the Pentagon is not ready for this right now, and certainly that predates this Secretary of Defense and this administration. It's a problem that we need to get after, to do the acquisition reform so that we can get the materials that we need quickly. Innovate more quickly. We've got a lot of good ideas in this committee. Look forward to working with the administration on trying to get that done. Second, the budget is a major problem. It is simply unacceptable that we are this late in the year and we do not have a budget. That's the basics of how you plan to do all of that. And this is but the culmination of a series of problems. We had a CR for FY25, largely at the insistence of President Trump. And then, by the time we did pass a budget, it was just a CR. And now we're on a path again towards a CR in FY26. There is no budget transparency and no plan that we can see. And what we have seen happening at the Pentagon in the interim is also very disturbing and without explanation. There's been talk about 8% cuts across the board. Nobody on this committee knows what that means. Some of it is happening and has not been made transparent to us. Is it going to make us better? Is it part of a larger strategy? Nobody really knows. We also heard the plan to cut 20% of the flag officers. Again, no strategy, no plan. This is why the budget is so important. The budget can inform all of this. Maybe that's a good idea, but we have no idea because there is no transparency and no follow-through. Also, quite disturbingly, within the Department of Defense and also across the federal government, the one and only criteria that is consistent is loyalty to Trump, as opposed to loyalty to the law or loyalty to the Constitution. This started with one of the more shameful events in DoD history, and that's when we pulled security details from former members of the Pentagon who faced security threats. Why were those security details pulled? They weren't pulled because anything told us that they were safe. Chairman Milley is one great example. He was on the threat list because he carried out an order from President Trump, and rightfully so, to kill Soleimani in the Middle East. He's now on Iran's hit list, and we pulled his security detail, leaving him and his family vulnerable. Why? Because he had the audacity to say something critical of President Trump. I mean, that's just embarrassing. If you told me 10 years ago on this committee that something like that would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you. And now we have a dictate from the White House saying that all federal employees will be tested for whether or not they are supportive of President Trump. New York Times had a great headline on that saying, why does an air traffic controller have to be a Trump supporter? Well, I would ask, why does an acquisition professional have to be a Trump supporter? If you're focused on loyalty, you're not focused on competency, you're not focused on ability, and it is the wrong way to go. Even within the budget, we see the influence of the president over the influence of common sense. We've all heard about the Golden Dome. When I first heard about the Golden Dome, it was interesting because it reminded me of a joke I first told about 12 years ago when we were dealing with a large number of Pentagon programs that were more ambitious than practical. Future combat systems, the expeditionary fighting vehicle. Basically they had, well, this is what we want. And we had this joke that, well, all I want is sharks with freaking laser beams attached to them. That became the armed services thing. I actually have a little plastic shark that my staff made for me with a laser beam attached to it. Making the perfect the enemy of the good is a problem. And nobody on this committee knows what Golden Dome is. And the other thing that's really important about this, contained within that is one of the most important national security threats that we face. Missile defense and counter-drone. We have a lot of programs that people are working on in that direction. What happens to those programs when we take $25 billion towards a project that no one can explain and no one can understand? And again, we don't have a budget, so we're taking it on faith. That is deeply troubling. Equally troubling is the Air Force One airplane that we got from Qatar. There's all kinds of ethics problems with that, which I'll leave aside for the moment. But that airplane is going to have to be fitted to be Air Force One. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, no transparency. We're not told what that's going to cost and where it's going to go. But because President Trump wanted it, he gets it. Hundreds of millions of dollars goes out the window. We don't have the capacity to sort of say, sorry, sir, that's not a good idea. And the last one on this list is one that, frankly, I had a hard time believing when I first heard it. Apparently, the president has decided that the F-35 would be a better plane if it had 2 engines. And to a certain degree, it's hard to argue with. I guess 2 engines is better than 1, except that you can't just add a second engine to the F-35. This is a program that's taken us over 25 years, and we are, knock on wood, finally to the point where we're going to have the plane. And I would have thought this would have been dismissed, but I hear defense contractors, Pentagon, they're looking at this idea. It is okay to tell the boss that he's wrong. We all have dumb ideas. It's good to have people around us who have the capability and the competency to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're walking down the wrong direction. In terms of the global strategy, I substantially agree with the chairman, except that I fear that, America first does mean America alone. We've seen that in a number of different issues, certainly placing tariffs on absolutely every country in the world, irrespective of our relationships. Well, sorry, except for Russia. Didn't place tariffs on Russia. That alienates people. Cutting off foreign aid programs, which I realize is not the purview of the Department of Defense, but I'll remind you of something that Secretary Gates said before this committee. If you're going to cut off the State Department, you better give me more ammunition. The two things are related. We stopped programs that were feeding hungry children in Africa. Literally took food out of the mouths of hungry children. Why? Apparently because there were a couple of USAID programs that supported LGBTQ programs. Now, why we didn't just cut those instead of cutting the ones that were feeding hungry children in Africa, I don't know, but that really sends the wrong message to the rest of the world. And the last one, and once we get to the Q&As, I would be curious to hear what the Secretary has to say about this. Threatening to use military force to invade Greenland and Panama. I don't believe the President has actually threatened military force against Canada just yet. He's just threatened to annex it. So Denmark, Canada, Panama, three peaceful nations that we are allies with, or were anyway. The message that sends to the rest of the world is one that the U.S. is purely in it for itself and does not care about the rest of the world. And this has implications. We're trying to stop China. We are in a global competition with China. We have built up excellent partnerships across Asia over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, in Australia, in Japan, in India, and the Philippines. Largely, that was because China exercised economic coercion. They went ballistic on Australia for daring to suggest that China could be more transparent about COVID, and Australia recalculated. Now we are the ones using economic coercion on our partners and allies and pushing them away. And this filters back over to Ukraine, where I am in violent agreement with the chairman about how important Ukraine is to our national security interests. And I also agree with the secretary. We need to get peace in Ukraine. The longer that war continues, the more dangerous it is for everybody. in Ukraine. The longer that war continues, the more dangerous it is for everybody. Jews, apparently, why we're putting that group in there. Because the thing is, the insulting, belittling language aside, you're right. There aren't enough trannies in Brooklyn or lesbians in San Francisco to fill the military. There also aren't enough, what's the word here, young, patriotic Christian men who remind us of John Wayne to fill the military either. We are a diverse nation. We need to be inclusive. And we need to not actively insult people who don't happen to fit our preconceived notion of what a member of the military should look like. So we're at a situation now where the military is denigrating Medgar Evers, who died standing up for the values that I think are central to our country. One of the things I love about the military is service above self. I mean, it's such an important message that everyone who serves us says that. No one I can think of personifies that more than Medgar Evers. Instead, we're going to go back to renaming the bases after the Confederates. Now, I know, apparently you spent a lot of time finding other names that applied to people who actually did serve this country honorably. But President Trump, just was it yesterday, 2 days ago now, down at Fort Bragg, when he blatantly politicized the United States military, sort of, as they like to say, said the quiet part out loud, that those bases are being renamed for the Confederates. So we honor white supremacist, slave-owning insurrectionists who lost, by the way, they're losers, instead of Medgar Evers. Can we please just stop and get back to the business of treating everybody equally and with respect? A fear of a left-wing cultural revolution is not solved by launching a right-wing cultural revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. And now I'd like to introduce our witnesses, all before us for the first time. General Kane, have you been before the committee before?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. First, we have the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. We have General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And accompanying our witnesses is Ms. Bryn McDonald, Acting DoD Comptroller, who is here to assist in answering our questions. Welcome. First, we'll start with you, Ms. Secretary. You're recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who's performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are very proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping America safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start today by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that improve the quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, we have directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in this budget to improve living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for military families, and improving the quality of the care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of our job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback we have received from the force. We will keep listening and keep looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion in total for national security, ends 4 years of chronic underinvestment